I now call this meeting to order. We welcome you to the LPUA meeting. We, as your representatives in the LPUA, welcome your involvement and encourage your participation. This meeting is a public hearing. If you wish to address the LPUA on any item on this agenda, please fill out the request form in the foyer on the computer provided. The electronic request to address the LPUA form must be filled out and submitted prior to the call of the agenda item, or you will not be given the opportunity to speak. If assistance is needed when submitting the request, staff is available to help. In the event a speaker has completed their comments prior to the expiration of their allotted 5 minutes, any remaining time shall be forfeited. If you have materials you wish to submit to the LPUA, please give those to the council clerk, Ms. Veronica L. Williams, seated to my left in the middle. In an effort to allow an opportunity to be heard, the 5-minute rule will be in effect. Speakers shall refrain from debating, personal attacks, and from making confrontational or derogatory comments. I am requesting that the first row to my left be used for media only. Food and drinks are not allowed in the auditorium, and all phone and electric devices shall be silenced from this point forward. I am also requesting that anyone who approaches the LPUA state their name and title for the official record. Meeting procedures are by resolution and not by Robert's Rules of Order. Documents including agendas, ordinances, resolution, and minutes related to this and other meetings are posted online at www.lafayettela.gov or refer to the web address on the top of the agenda. I have a couple of announcements. LPUA Chair Liz Hebert is unable to attend tonight's meeting due to a previously scheduled work event, so that's why you have me. I'm the Vice Chair and will be chairing in her absence. Item number 5, final adoption of resolution number R003-218, LPUA, relative to the utilities revenue bonds. The Mayor, President, and legal have requested an amendment to make changes to the bond council and underwriter language. Any chair announcements? From the council, excuse me. Nope. Let's see. All right, I'd like to recognize Mayor President Robideau or Mr. Duyon. Anything? Nothing at this time. All right, let's see. V, do we have any comments from the public? Yes, ma'am. Okay, this portion of our meeting is an opportunity to make your voice heard before the LPUA, the administration, and the public. This is the time to speak about LUS topics that are not included as agenda items. Please, we request that all matters regarding specific LUS employees be directed to the administration and it not be addressed at this public forum. We, as the LPUA, have a concern for the privacy and protection of our government employees. With that said, however, if your concern is not resolved in either an expeditious or satisfactory fashion, there are other avenues which can be pursued, and we ask that you follow up with the council office. Also, confrontational statements and/or threats will not be tolerated. We ask that you conduct yourself in a civil manner and with the same courtesy that you would expect of others, and there is a 5-minute rule. Can I call for the public comment?
The first speaker, Madam Chair, is Simon Mahan.
This is nothing on the agenda item, just a reminder. Is that correct? Okay.
Good evening. My name is Simon Mahan. I'm a resident of Lafayette. I live in District 2. Just wanted to come here this evening and share some really interesting information from Colorado. There's a big utility out there called Excel. They recently had a request for proposals for energy resources. They received an awful lot of bids, and some of the bids that they received include things like wind power, solar power, batteries, and an amalgamation of those options. And in the energy industry, this is kind of caught on like wildfire because the prices were so low that this utility received. So one of the average pricing units for wind energy example was $18 per megawatt hour. That's an average price. They received solar power average pricing of $29.50 per megawatt hour. That's 2.95 cents per kilowatt hour. If you merge those resources with batteries, wind plus solar plus batteries to help even out the peaks and the valleys of the batteries. The price came in at about $30 per megawatt hour. To help put that a little bit into context of what's going on here in Lafayette, we spend about, based on my bill, 4.4 cents per kilowatt hour just for fuel. And so when we buy natural gas or when we buy coal for our power plants, that fuel costs 4.4 cents per kilowatt hour. The numbers coming out of Colorado suggest that if we were to add renewable energy resources like wind, solar, and now battery storage options, we could actually reduce our fuel costs here in Lafayette. We've seen power prices for wind and solar and battery storage decrease significantly over the past 3 or 4 years. Wind power prices have come down by about 65%. Solar power prices have come down by about 85%, and the prices continue to decline. So we know that these resources are valuable and low cost. And here in Louisiana, Southwestern Electric Power Company, a major electric utility up in Shreveport, is actually building or constructing the nation's largest wind farm in Oklahoma. So they'll be constructing the wind farm in Oklahoma, purchasing it, and bringing the power down here to Louisiana. And the reason why they're doing it is they said that it's the lowest cost energy option that they could get. So Louisianians are going to be benefiting from a little over a gigawatt or 1,000 megawatts of new wind energy resources coming to our neck of the woods. On top of it, our grid operator, the Mid-Continent Independent System Operator, recently released its analysis suggesting that not only are solar power resources valuable and economic for southern Louisiana, but they also evaluated battery storage options and found that there are hundreds of megawatts of sites across southern Louisiana where battery storage is now economically viable. So I'd recommend following what other utilities are doing and issuing an RFP for renewable energy resources as well as for battery storage to get a sense of what the market looks like. Compare that to what we're currently doing and what we're going to be doing for the future. That's the recommendation, that's the request, a request for proposals for those energy resources. The final request that I have is one that I've been making for quite some time, is some sort of open public stakeholder process. As you're all aware, utilities, electric power issues, it's exceptionally complex, but there are folks in town that are interested in it. They want to have a vision for Lafayette. They're very proud of the city. And so we want to make sure that what happens at our power plants and with LUS reflects what the community wants and what the future looks like. It's not hard to look at some other utilities that we see have these open public processes, and it's quite remarkable how useful public input can be in an open and transparent dialogue. These council meetings are great, and I enjoy attending when I can, but it's not a dialogue. And so the more that we can have a dialogue to discuss issues fairly and openly in the public, I think we'll have a better result for everything. So I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any other speakers?
No, ma'am.
All right. I guess we'll move on to the resolutions. This is a public hearing, and blue sheets are available for anyone wishing to address the LPUA. The 5-minute rule does apply. Jeremy, can you read the resolution, please?
Resolution of the Lafayette Public Utilities Authority giving preliminary approval to the issuance of utilities revenue bonds of the City of Lafayette, State of Louisiana, in a total amount not exceeding $240 million, authorizing the officials of the city to proceed with the preparation of the documents required for the issuance of such utilities revenue bonds, applying to the State Bond Commission for consent and authority to issue such bonds, and providing for other matters in connection therewith.
Wait, I didn't get to ask for a motion or second. I was supposed to ask for a motion or second, but it's been motioned and second. I also want to announce an amendment is proposed to amend Section 5 and delete Section 6 with reference to bond counsel and the underwriter. Can I have a motion? Okay, Kenneth made the motion and Conk seconded it. And again? same thing again. Motion and a second from both the same. And is there any LPUA discussion on the amendment? Okay, how do I get you to speak? Oh, okay, that's you.
Good. You good? Thank you. Got a good little team thing going here. Thank you very much and congratulations. I just offered the amendment and Mr. Conk seconded the amendment, but I want to kind of now delve into the resolution a little bit as it relates to what projects may be in this resolution, what is being considered, and then look at the dollar amount. So if we could start there. If someone wants to give us an idea of what's being considered here for the 240.
Yes, good afternoon. So let me kind of take a step back and explain what the purpose of the resolution is that any time that the city of Lafayette needs to borrow money, if we're going to go to sell bonds, we have to get authorization from the State Bond Commission in Baton Rouge, which is a group of people appointed and legislators that are part of that process with us. Typically what we do is we try and get those authorizations kind of far ahead of time, and we put them at a level that keeps us from having to go there often to make that happen. And then that resolution, once it goes to the State Bond Commission and they approve it, doesn't mean that we spend a dime on anything. What we have to do next after that is to begin to finalize the projects we want to move forward with that can be built within a 3-year term, because whenever you issue tax-exempt bonds, you have to be able to spend that money in 3 years from the issuance of it. That's by the federal government laws. So what we would do is say, in this case here, we're looking for $240 million of overall authorization from the State Bond Commission, but that would be coming back to you with for projects that are far less than that. I'm thinking somewhere probably around the $60 or $70 million range. That would involve same projects we discussed during the budget session. You might recall when we came to you for the rate ordinance changes that we had a couple of years ago. We kind of laid out all the things that we had planned to do over a period of time. We started with some of that now with the cash that we have, but it's really limiting. We're just using the pay-as-you-go cash to do that. We need something, more substantive to be able to move forward with all of the projects that we have. And none of those projects that we're looking forward in our first phase have to do with electric generation. They all have to do with wastewater, water, and some small distribution, comparatively small electric distribution type work that we need to have in town. Some of the projects, the biggest ones have to do with the sewer plant to be able to remain in compliance with EPA and DEQ regulations. We're having to make major upgrades. You might recall the area along West Bayou Parkway at our South Sewer plant is where we're planning for most of our biggest upgrades because we have the most available property there. But there are also other projects related to that go along with it. Sewer costs are very, very expensive. Big pipes, a lot of concrete, a lot of digging that's associated with that. On the water side, we saw again just this past last month about when the system gets taxed with heavy water usage like we had during the freeze, that we had some areas in the city that were impacted, areas that we had identified of projects that we need to get done. And of course, it's during an extreme time, but it's during extreme times that you got to be able to deliver. Customers don't forgive the fact that during the worst times that you're not able to deliver. And so, we got fairly close at that particular point. We used the most water that we ever have used in a day in Lafayette as a result of that. We had gotten our water pressures down to about 25 pounds per square inch in some areas. When you get below 15 pounds per square inch, you have to have a boil water advisory. A lot of other water systems had to go through that and ask their customers to go through that inconvenience. We didn't have to do so. But when you have that much hemorrhaging of water, and we talked about this earlier after the storm came through, it's very difficult to deal with that, because what happens when the temperatures get up and the lines defrost, and that's where you see where the breakages are. And if there's a lot of them all occurring at one time, then it can create problems. So those are some of the kind of projects that we have. And we could go through a complete inventory of lists, but it's all in the 5-year plan, and basically looking at the first 3 years of the 5-year plan that we have. Again, without having the generation involved. On the electrical side, one of the fastest growing areas in the city of Lafayette, where we have the least amount of capability for growth, is on the east side of town. All that area around Louisiana Avenue, going north from there, going south towards Turlings, and going almost all the way to Oakbourne Country Club area. All of that area is on one substation. It never, the load has never required us to upgrade it beyond that point. Now it's getting to the point we need to do so. And as you have more load, you have more chances for, problems where the power goes out and the number of customers affected by that. And just as an aside to that, having nothing to do with us, just today, in Carencro, the utility provider there had a problem with a pole and ended up knocking out the whole city, or virtually the whole city, for about 5 hours. Can you imagine what that would be like if something like that happens in Lafayette? And it's not meant to be a scare tactic. It's part of what we have to live with. We have to live with those vulnerabilities that we can't always predict, and that at the same time the public expects us to respond. So what we're trying to do is to kind of stay up and really get ahead of the things that we need to get done to provide proper service to our customers. Again, we're not looking at building any generation with this, and we're not doing anything with this ordinance, this resolution, other than to ask you to give us the okay to go to Baton Rouge to get this taken care of one time. It just saves, whether we have X amount of dollars or 3X amount of dollars, the level of work it takes to get there and to prepare for that and to deal with it is all the same. So we'd like to have it all done at one time, and then we'll come to you during regular council meetings and the LPUA meetings that lay out the specific projects we're going to be doing and laying out how much of a bond issue we're going to actually need to begin with. And so the public will have a lot of opportunity to participate, because in those particular instances, it's an ordinance. So there'll be an introductory ordinance as well as a final adoption ordinance. So what I'm asking you, just to facilitate us being able to move forward and not having to, come back to do this part again, is to go ahead and give us the authorization that we've requested for the $240 million, and that's way on the high end. I know it's on the high end, but it's again just to make sure that we've covered all the bases, and then we'll be coming back to you each time that we're looking to issue bonds to get your authorization for us to move forward.
So,
There's an echo.
They remoted in from Baton Rouge to try to fix it, and
good, thank you.
I didn't do it.
You broke it already.
Do it. Wasn't me.
So, thank you, Terry, and so basically, in a nutshell, the $240 million, obviously, if was authorized, would only be considered for projects that's in our capital. Got that and understand that. Like I've indicated before, I think this council's fiduciary responsibility is greater than it's ever been. It's my opinion that people look at government in a way today like they've never looked at it before. And some governments choose to continue to do things the way they've always done them, and that could work sometimes. I believe that sometimes you could change and you could, I guess, gain more ground, win more battles. I prefer, my historical budgeting practices has always been, let's ask for what we need, let's do what we ask for, let's improve upon our track record, and then we build better relationships. Now, I realize that that has little to do on the professional side of things. That's how they look at us here, as far as I'm concerned. Let me ask you this. Do you have any unspent bond money at this time?
We have very little spent. How much we have left, you think, Laurie? It's not much. We're going to be spending it fairly quickly. So we're using that first in all cases.
Do we have a number? Do we have anything at all? You could lower it too.
It's very immaterial. LUS has a history of keeping the projects on track and on time.
Okay, so we're good in that area. Good.
Yes. For the utilities.
Terry, so this particular resolution says 240. You started your comments by saying 60 to 70. What happens when we go from 240 to 60 or 70? What does that look like? How can we actually just do that? Like, what does that number represent, I guess? Let me ask that.
Okay. What that represents
does-
is the projects that I think we can complete in 3 years.
Okay.
And so when we come back to you for the bond ordinance approval in the future, it would include those projects, and then once we finish with those projects, we'd have to go back to the State Bond Commission.
Okay.
So it's more of a formality to go to State Bond Commission. As you know, I realize when you put the number there, you're dealing in a public setting, some people might think we can spend $240 million. And the answer is, it's possible we might, but it's going to be over a much longer period of time. We're just trying to get that authorization all done at one time. But I think, if we had, the numbers we've talked about what we can do in 3 years or so, about the $60 or $70 million range is what we think would cover the major projects that I can get done in the 3-year requirement that you have for the spending of bond funds.
Right. And it ties into the same areas that you spoke of as far as sewage, water, some of the issues. It just is the ones that you could do.
Yes, sir.
Okay, all right. Madam Chair, I'm going to offer an amendment at this time. And if you could get Mr. S. Scott to assist. Paul, basically, I just want to accomplish to take that 240 million and reduce it to 60 million.
Can I make a bargain for 75 just to give me proper coverage?
I'd rather not.
Just remember, there's a project that we don't do. When we run into a dead end and we've got to come back and do this, and you never know what the politics of things are. The projects that we don't do might be projects that have a big impact. So that's why I'm asking. These projects here have nothing to do with electric generation. I understand the sensitivities about that. That's not on the board. What I'm asking for about $70 million is to make sure that we could that we can get everything done that I want us to try and get done.
Paul, 70 million.
Let's make a deal.
It can depend on how long he would take. If he would take a while, we could move on, but I think he's just changing that. That's a good point.
Okay. If I understand you correct, your intent is to offer a motion to amend where any reference to the not to exceed 240 million is replaced with the not to exceed 70 million. That would occur in the title of the resolution on the 4th line. That would occur in the first whereas paragraph on the 4th line. And that would occur in section 2 on the 2nd line.
Okay. So, Madam Chair, my amendment is going to be to replace not to exceed 240 million in the title of the resolution, in the first whereas of the resolution, line 4, and in section 2 of the resolution, the second line with not to exceed 70 million. That's my motion.
Do I have a second? Do I need a, okay. All right. Is there any public comment on this amendment?
You could come back to comment on that one after. You could stay within the council discussion, because they're gonna have some talk.
I know, but, so
Yeah.
we don't go there yet?
No, not yet,
Hold on.
because you finish up all your
Okay, so we call for the
LPUA, finish up your LPUA members first. No voting yet.
Okay, well, that's the only amendment. That's the only one.
You got two. We had the first one that changed up on the right.
Okay.
I'm helping out, then we got the second one where I changed them all with Ken and Pat.
So I need a motion for that.
No, that's already done. So right now, just go to whoever's next to speak. Go to exit.
Okay. Okay.
To Bruce.
Oh, wait. There we go. All right. You're up.
We should explain that Ms. Cook is our chair for today because Ms. Hebert is out of town on business, and this is her first time at the board.
that bad?
It's fun, right? No, you're doing much better than I did the first time around. Protocol question, procedure question. Kenneth and I were talking, he's looking for 70, I had suggested 80. If his amendment doesn't pass, we are allowed to do an additional amendment to change the amount if that's appropriate, correct?
You certainly can offer your own amendment with a
After the
different
vote on this. Okay, thank you, sir.
Okay, thank you. Let's see. Do I need to clear? Go back. Okay. All right, so can I call for the vote on this amendment?
Public comment on the amendment. You can
Okay,
go
now
now.
we're ready.
Okay, and I think Simon Mahan, who had signed in, he would like to speak.
They vote on it first.
Good evening, Simon Mahan, resident of Lafayette, District 2. This will be my only comment period as I have to go pick up my child at daycare. But I will stay germane to the amendment of $70 million. I do want to note the total 5-year capital budget for LUS is $246 million for all of 5 years, not just 3. That includes the new power plant, along with sewer, water, wastewater, et cetera. Just thought that should be mentioned. I really appreciate what's being done here in recognizing that the $240 million is totally out of line at this point. From the public standpoint on this, I do my job as a citizen. I check the agenda Thursday, Friday, I read it, I look at the ordinance, I look at the resolution, I look at what documentation is provided at that time. And this resolution doesn't pass any smell test whatsoever. To initially ask for $250 million with little to no public information associated with it, no list of actual projects planned, that is not public power. And I do appreciate the intent of trying to carve out the unnecessary and unwanted power plant. However, we're legislating on the fly, $10 million at a time. We just had an election about $9 million in funding for flood issues, which I supported. And I gladly supported because we needed that discussion and we needed that to happen. But what's happening right now is, should we give LUS a blank check for $60 million or $70 million or $80 million with no list, no itemization, no prioritization, no schedule of what they plan to do with however much money they are awarded for? That is crazy. I highly recommend, at a minimum, that this resolution be postponed at least 2 weeks until LUS comes back with a schedule, a list of issues that they plan to address, and actual proposed prices of those things. The northeastern substation that was just previously mentioned, I think it's needed. It costs $3 million according to the budget. Put it in a list. State when an RFP is going to be put out for that substation and when it's going to be selected and when that substation is going to be purchased and built. It needs to be done for that neck of the woods, especially if we're getting a new racetrack. I hear that's what we're getting over at Louisiana Avenue, which I think is fabulous. If we're going to do big things, we need to have a schedule, we need to have itemization, we need to have transparency. Calling back to the 5-year plan that was passed in the budget back in September is not transparency. If you look in there, there's $120 million for a new generation station. No explanation of how big it is, where it would be placed, how often it would operate, different alternatives. At that time, I went to those budget meetings. I spoke about them. We were promised that that power station was being postponed. But when LUS comes back and requests effectively the entirety of the 5-year capital expenditure budget, that's outrageous. It's not only offensive to the citizens, but it should be offensive to you all as well. There's public trust at issue here, and very few people are watching. Hopefully they'll be watching a little bit more closely now. I highly recommend voting against this right now and issuing a statement saying we would like itemization, schedules, and pricing in the near future. And with that, I need to leave. Thank you.
Next speaker, Madam Chair, is Michael Walden. Do you want to speak on the amendment for the 70 million?
Take your name off.
Okay.
I'm Dr. Michael Walden. I'm a resident of Lafayette and Councilman Lewis's District 3. I'm here to speak against this proposal. I was appalled when I read it. There's just nothing there. It's like, let's spend $240 million and not tell you why. That's not good government. I understand the concept of streamlining, but streamlining to one person is disempowering others. We need to look at the proposed expenditures each one at a time. Those should go before the bonding commission one at a time. One of my great concerns is that this money is going to be spent on a 30-year loan on things that aren't going to last 30 years. And this little boy that was just sitting here, Simon's son, is still going to be paying those payments. Quick calculation on my calculator, on my phone, loan calculator, says we're going to be paying, if we borrow $70 million, we're going to be paying about $5 million a year for the next 30 years. Plus, we'll have to pay for the insurance and the fees for the management. I want to look at the projects. I want the public to be able to see those. If it's fixing a broken pipe and you're going to charge us 30 years to fix it, that's not right. That's not good government. So I speak against this. I can tell you that this morning when I saw this on the internet and I made a little post on Facebook, Facebook is buzzing about this. This isn't the way to do government. And I hope you will vote either against it or at least table it until some better explanation can be given to the public about why you need a credit card that's got a 30-year payout that is going to cost the ratepayers so much money. Thank you.
And Madam Chair, what we usually do is, because this amendment came from the floor, it's on the floor, if there are any other citizens who would like to speak to the $70 million amendment, then they're welcome to come up now. Are there any other citizens? Okay.
So I probably need Mr. Escott to, oh, Bruce, okay. All right, I'm sorry, Bruce.
I mentioned earlier that Mr. Boudreau's amendment is for 70. I'm going for 80, because I think in any project, especially over a 3-year period, you should have some contingency built into it. But the question I have, Mr. Escott, and it's a question that's occurred over the years since 1996. LPUA amends the resolution down to $70 or $80 million. When it goes to the full council for a vote, does it remain at the 240 million level or at the recommended level adjustment from the LPUA?
It stays as it is on the agenda until it's amended by the council.
That's what I thought, and I think that's a serious flaw in our charter, which we've been addressing since 1996. So whatever is done at this level is really only at this level, and we begin the argument all over again at the council at 5:30.
You have a question? No. Sorry.
Right.
Oh, wait. There you go.
So, Mr. Paul, my question would be, like Bruce is saying, that we start all over again. So other amendments can happen as well, or it's just the amendments that are made in front of us right now?
Right now, there are 2 pending amendments. The first that I assume Chairwoman Cook is going to deal with, excuse me, is the $70 million amendment offered by Mr. Boudreau. Once that vote is taken, you then need to vote or actually ask if there's any public comment on the first amendment that dealt with the amendments to Section 5 and Section 6. Once that's done, you vote on that amendment, and then thereafter, any amendments can be made by any member going forward.
So which amendment would really count? Okay. What I'm getting at is just amongst us right now, but then when it comes in front of the full council, which one will set precedence? 5 votes?
Yeah, neither amendment or any other amendments made in this meeting by the LPUA carry over, so to speak, to the council agenda item that is currently pending and will be heard at the 5:30 meeting. And in order to ensure that whatever is approved by LPUA ultimately becomes effective, it's going to have to be consistent with whatever the council approves and passes. So just be aware of that nuance.
Okay.
Thank you. So, yeah, Paul just said what I was about to say. At the end of the day, the 2 amendments that we're considering, and I'm going to just say that they'll both pass, okay? And then the ordinance will be adopted at that dollar amount. My intent would be to duplicate the same thing at the council meeting. One amendment has already been provided by the administration and legal, and of course, the newest amendment would be brought forward as well, as he indicated, so that it could ultimately be in effect. Both bodies have to adopt the same issue. When we used to handle LPUA and council issues at the same time before we separated the meetings for good reason, it was you took care of it all at one time. So we do it twice. So just a couple of closing comments before we go to our vote or get other public input is, the 70 million for me, I don't view that as necessarily arbitrary. I was gonna actually probably go a little lower. But what I would offer is that in government, you have an administration and you have a legislative branch of government. And as indicated, there has to be some trust along the way. And I trust the administration, I trust the department's leadership. I was not in agreement with the whole 240 million, and I think I stated why I was not. And I don't mind going back multiple times to send a better and clear message to our constituency in general, and in the public, as a whole. So that's not my issue. The reason I recommended 70 rather than 40 is because I had a professional engineer who I trust stand before me and said, you give me 70, I could spend 70 in 3 years, and I think that's how this works. If I can't trust, this particular person or any director to some degree, I think we ought to all go home. But, the 240, some people say it was unreasonable. I kind of agree. We addressed it. It was never an intent to zero it out. It was never intent to stop work. It's never an intent to shut down government or shut down projects or shut down programs. The transparency can be improved. We've talked about that. I realize that there's not a project that could be considered that's not already in the budget book, number one. There's not a project that can be executed without coming back before this council, number two. But in my 10 years here, that just seemed to still have not been enough. And I have said, because the needs are so great, we got to be that good as a government. We have to become that good. And my efforts are to try to get us that good, so that every time we have an ask or we put something out there, the first response isn't hell no. The first response is they must be crazy. The first response is, they don't know what they're doing. That actually somewhere along the way, somebody gonna say, you know what? They've changed the way they've done business without interrupting the government process. So we'll see what happens with 70, and then if not, Bruce probably offer an amendment, but that's where I got 70 from. It was because there needed to be a reduction, but it wasn't a reduction to stop progress and to get to the things that need to happen in 3 years on a 5-year plan. That's in a 5-year plan. In a year from now, more could be considered. But I could tell you, imagine this, and Bruce and I was just talking about it. In 3 years, I won't even be here. Another council is going to be able to, well, these 3 members hopefully will still be here, but it's going to be a whole nother council making that consideration. I remember when I came in 2008, some of the things that I was lapped with. One of the first things I had to do was undo something that shouldn't have never been done in the first place. So again, I have a responsibility here, and I'm going to see it through. And it's going to just go the way it goes. But the director has said 70 million. It's not what he wants, it's not what he asked for, but 70 million, he could make it work. I'm willing to do 70. And at the same time, I would hope that it is viewed that, guess what? They just took 100 and, who got their calculator, 40, whatever, 30, 60, 70, Something was done, whether it was to your satisfaction or not. So I just wanted to share that, and I know Simon had to go. He indicated before the meeting that he couldn't stay for the second meeting, but I just wanted, as it relates to the transparency, the arbitrary number, the $10 million waive. This is the best process we have available to us at this point, with a full commitment to improve upon it every day. That's what I could give you. Thank you.
I'd like to give the floor to Mayor President Robideau.
Thank you, Madam Acting Chairman. First, let me just say that I appreciate the efforts of the LPUA Council, and certainly anything that we can do to build trust with the public, I think, is paramount to anything else that we could do. So certainly appreciate your efforts here today. Just, I guess, as much, Paul, for me, as a lesson in our charter and what it means, and I have no expectation that this will occur, but if there's conflict between the LPUA resolution as it comes out of here today and conflict with what the council would pass, does that basically mean the resolutions are null and void individually? And we basically, it's like we don't have a resolution and we'd have to reintroduce and start the process over? Yeah, well, I think that in and of itself proves Bruce's point that there is some obviously work that needs to be done on the charter, because that just makes no sense that the 5, city elected officials can't pass something as it affects the city-owned utility. So, thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. President, let's see.
Very quick comment. I am going to vote against the 70 million amendment, but if it passes, I will support it at the council level so that we show unity as the LPUA. Thank you.
So I guess we're at the point where we're going to call for the vote on the amendment. If, Mr. Escott, if you could kind of clarify a few
Sure.
things.
The vote that you're calling for is on the amendment offered by Mr. Boudreau as it relates to the $70 million figure.
All right, so I'm going to call for the vote.
District 3? Yes. District 4?
Yes.
District 6?
No.
District 7?
Yes.
Motion is approved.
So now we have, public comment on the amendment. Is there anyone?
Signed in was Simon, who left. Michael Walden, if you would like to speak on the original amendment.
Yes, I'm Michael Walden. I just urge you to vote against this, or at least to table it. This just doesn't look good to the public. I know there's going to be other public here at the council meeting who are going to be opposing this. This really looks bad for you. And this means the next LPUA that comes in after you spend this money is going to have $5 million a year sucked out of their budget to pay for this that you're spending right now. It's borrowing into the future. And I don't see any evidence that you're borrowing for things that are going to be here for 30 years. That's why you need to have good documentation on how these are truly capital expenses and not just maintenance when you're borrowing money for a very long term. Otherwise, get short-term bonds. That's another reason why you might want to borrow different amounts at different times. Perhaps at times you should do a 5-year bond issue. And if something's just maintenance that maybe is only going to last 5 years. But don't put a $5 million burden on the next LPUA. Don't put that burden on our children who are still going to be paying this $5 million a year. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comments? Okay, so I'm going to call for the vote to adopt the resolution as... Oh, the original amendment, I'm sorry.
District 3? District 4?
Yes.
District 6?
Yes.
District 7?
Yes.
Motion to amend is approved.
Okay, now we call for the... Okay, so now we call for the vote to adopt the resolution as amended.
District 3?
Yes.
District 4?
Yes.
District 6?
Yes.
District 7?
Yes.
Motion to adopt as amended is approved.
Okay, we move on to ordinance for final adoption. Jeremy, can you please read the first one?
Ordinance 3, 2018 LPUA, an ordinance of the Lafayette Public Utilities Authority providing for the abandonment of a portion of a utility easement on Lot 3A of Howard's having a municipal address of 4603 Johnson Street.
Okay, a motion from Mr. Boudreau and a second from Mr. Conk. Any LPUA discussion? Seeing none, any public comments on this?
We do have one speaker, Paul Myers.
Only to answer any questions.
Only to answer questions.
Okay. Then I'm going to call for the vote to adopt the ordinance.
District 4?
Yes.
District 6?
Yes.
District 7?
Yes.
District 3? Yes. Motion to adopt is approved.
Jeremy, can you read the next ordinance, please?
Ordinance 4, 2018 LPUA, an ordinance of the Lafayette Public Utilities Authority providing for the abandonment of a portion of the right-of-way for Silkwood Street and the granting of 2 utility servitudes on the property of Philip Gotchesin located in the 2000 block of West St. Mary Boulevard.
I have a motion from Mr. Boudreaux and a second from Mr. Conk. Any LPUA discussion? Any public comments on this ordinance? Then let's call for the vote.
District 6?
Yes.
District 7?
Yes.
District 3?
Yes.
District 4?
Yes.
Motion to adopt is approved.
If I could have a motion or a second from the LPA to introduce the ordinances. Okay, I got a motion from Boudreaux and a second from Mr. Lewis. Jeremy, can you read the ordinances, please?
Ordinance 5, 2018, LPUA, an ordinance of the Lafayette Public Utilities Authority authorizing the Lafayette City Parish Consolidated Government to sell at public auction surplus vehicles, equipment, and other miscellaneous movable property which are no longer needed for public purposes as per the attached list auction. Ordinance 6, 2018, LPUA, an ordinance of the Lafayette Public Utilities Authority authorizing the Lafayette City Parish Consolidated Government to sell at internet auction miscellaneous surplus LCG movable property which are no longer needed for public purposes as per the attached list auction.
Any comments from the public concerning? All right, call for any from LPUA either? Guess not. Let's call for the vote.
District 7?
Yes.
District 3?
Yes.
District 4? Yes. District 6?
Yes.
Motion to introduce in globo is approved.
All right, we have a director's update. Mr. Huval, do you have anything you want to say?
Yes, I won't stay too long, so I know we've got another meeting coming up after this. I want to thank y'all, the LPUA, for your support and helping us continue to move on to keep the projects that we need to move forward for the future of Lafayette intact. And, you know, this will give us a good 3 years, if the council approves it, good 3 years to be able to make some improvements and to prepare for the future. You know, I realize to those that aren't integrated into the process, that sometimes they can have some questions, and I respect that. But in the end, whatever we do with the system is going to be what makes a difference on whether the lights are on or off. And that's not a scare tactic, it's a reality. The people in Karen Crow experienced the wrong side of that today because they were served by a utility that only had one source of feed. And so therefore, when that went out, they had to wait, you know, a good 5 hours before they got power on. I'm sure if we had a situation like that occur in Lafayette today, we'd have a whole different discussion publicly and as well as with you. The same is true concerning how we have to operate our water and sewer systems to be able to deal with the worst of circumstances. You know, any apology as to why we weren't able to do that falls flat. You know, the purpose of the people that we have here working for us give a lot of effort into trying to be sure that we're studying the projects properly, that we're looking at the priorities. There's always a need. There's always pushes from a lot of different directions, whether it's from an environmental side or it's from serving the public side. And I'll commit to you, as I've done to the public for all these years, that we're going to do what's the right thing for the community, for the utility system. And I appreciate your support in helping us keep those steps going forward.
Thank you, Mr. Huval, and this meeting is adjourned.